All right, listen, before we even get into this, I just want you to picture something because football, man, it's supposed to be this beautiful game. It's supposed to be about passion, skill, glory, but every now and then it turns into something else, something dark, something you can't. And that's what makes it so wild. Because one second you're watching magic and the next second you're staring at a nightmare unfold right in front of millions of people. And the crazy part is, these moments don't just break bones, they break careers, they break spirits. Sometimes they even shake entire nations. And that's why today we're diving straight into the most shocking, the most brutal, the most unforgettable injuries football has ever seen. And I'm telling you, once you hear these stories, you'll never look at the game the same way again. So buckle up, because this isn't just highlights and goals. This is the side of football nobody wants to talk about, but everybody remembers forever. Man, let me tell you about one of the most brutal, stomach-turning moments in football history. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this. This scarred people for life. It was April 1996. Coventry City versus Manchester United at Old Trafford. And this guy, David Busst, he's a defender, nothing flashy, just doing his job, steps up into the box during a corner. And what happens next is the kind of thing that makes you question how fragile the human body actually is, because he collides with Dennis Irwin and Brian McClare, and the impact is so bad that his right leg literally snaps. I'm talking tibia and fibula both shattering instant. And here's the craziest part, the break was so violent that pieces of bone punctured through the skin, blood everywhere, and Petr Schmeichel, United's goalkeeper, the guy who's seen everything, he's this giant Viking of a man. And even he couldn't handle it. He literally turned away, went pale, and started throwing up on the pitch. That's how bad it was. It was the kind of injury that makes even the toughest dudes sick to their stomach. And this wasn't just a broken leg you put in a cast. It was a catastrophic career-ending moment right there on live television with tens of thousands of people watching. And doctors rushed on immediately because Bust's leg wasn't just broken, it was destroyed. He ended up needing something like 26 operations, not to play football again, just to save the leg from being amputated. And get this, in the process of all those surgeries, he contracted a serious infection, which was another battle on its own. Like one second you're a professional footballer, marking players in the Premier League, and the next you're fighting to keep your leg from being cut off. That's how insane this was. And it left such a mark on football culture because everyone who saw it live says they'll never forget the image. The blood on the pitch, players looking shell-shocked, the atmosphere in Old Trafford turning from roaring noise to eerie silence in seconds. And what's wild is that David Busst himself has been so open about it later, like he embraced the fact that this freak accident defined his career. But in that moment, man, it was pure horror. And it's one of those incidents that reminds you football might look like a beautiful game, but in the wrong second, under the wrong collision, it becomes a nightmare right before your eyes. And the way people still talk about it, decades later, shows just how scarring that single moment really was. Man, if you want to talk about a moment that just stopped football in its tracks, Eduardo da Silva's leg injury back in 2008 is one of those things that people who watched it live still get chills thinking about. This was Arsenal versus Birmingham City, and Eduardo, this young, exciting Brazilian-born Croatian striker, was absolutely flying at the time. He was supposed to be Arsenal's next big weapon, fast, clinical, this guy who could change games, and then just 3 minutes into the match, he gets this tackle from Martin Taylor. And dude, it wasn't just a bad challenge. It was like a nightmare scenario. Taylor comes in late, studs up, and the moment of impact is so horrific that Eduardo's ankle literally snaps. His left leg twists in a way that doesn't even look real. And the bone is sticking out through the sock like the human body isn't supposed to bend like that. And everyone in that stadium just froze. Players who were used to hard tackles and physical play, they were covering their faces. Some couldn't even look. Cesc Fabregas looked like he was about to cry, and you could see the ref, Mike Dean, immediately pull out a red card for Taylor, but even he looked shaken, because when you're standing 3 feet away and you see a guy's foot pointing in the complete wrong direction, it's a whole different level of shock. And here's the thing, Eduardo had to be treated on the pitch for what felt like forever, like medics trying to stabilize his leg. And when they carried him off on the stretcher, the entire Arsenal team looked like they just lost a brother. You could tell it wasn't just about football in that moment. It was about a man whose career, whose dream might have just been ripped away in 1 second, and Arsene Wenger, who never loses his cool, went off afterwards. He was so angry at Taylor he said he should never play again. While he later walked that back, you could feel the raw emotion because Eduardo wasn't just injured, he was destroyed in his prime, and what's crazy is the psychological toll it had. Arsenal's momentum collapsed that season. They were leading the Premier League before that match, and it felt like the team just couldn't recover emotionally. Like the trauma lingered, and Eduardo himself, even though he made a comeback later, was never truly the same. That sharpness, that edge, that fearlessness he had before, it just wasn't there anymore. And when you think about it, that's the real tragedy. Because it wasn't just a broken bone, it was a career trajectory shattered in seconds. And fans who saw that injury live will tell you it was one of the ugliest, most gut-wrenching things ever seen on a football pitch. One of the scariest moments in football history wasn't even about a broken leg or some gruesome open wound. It was about Petr Čech almost losing his life on the pitch. And that's not me being dramatic. This was October, and literally within the first minute of the game, Čech goes down to collect the ball, standard move for a keeper, and Stephen Hunt, a Reading midfielder, comes charging in. His knee smashes directly into Čech's head, and at first it doesn't even look that bad on TV, like you see him roll over holding his head, but then he doesn't get up, and suddenly everyone realizes this isn't your usual knock. This is serious, and what people didn't know until later was that his skull was fractured, not like a crack, but a legit life-threatening break, where doctors said if the medical staff hadn't acted so quickly, he could have died right there on the pitch, because when you fracture the skull like that, you're talking brain swelling, internal bleeding, all the worst-case scenario, and he had to have emergency surgery that night. Surgeons literally went in and repaired his skull with plates, and the dude was in intensive care fighting just to survive, not thinking about football, thinking about staying alive. And here's the wild part. 2 weeks later, Chelsea's other keeper, Carlo Cudicini, also gets knocked out cold in a game, so suddenly you realize how insane and dangerous the job actually is. These guys are diving headfirst into boots and knees for a living, and Čech, when he eventually came back months later, was wearing that rugby-style protective helmet. And at first people thought it looked kind of weird, but that became his trademark. That helmet was a symbol that this dude literally walked back from the edge of death just to keep playing. And what's crazy is how psychological it was, because once you've had your skull smashed in, how do you ever dive into a crowded penalty area again? Without hesitation, but Čech did, and he stayed at the top level for years, winning titles, Champions League, all of it. And even though people joked about the helmet deep down, everyone knew what it really meant. It was a reminder of how dangerous football can be, and how thin the line is between a normal play and a career-ending, life-threatening disaster. And to this day, when you think about Petr Čech, you don't just think about the world-class keeper. You think about a guy who literally survived one of the scariest injuries ever and kept playing like nothing could stop him. Man, when you talk about bad luck and absolute freak accidents in football, Djibril Cissé is like the poster boy for it. Because this dude didn't just break his leg once, he broke it twice in ways that make you cringe just thinking about it. The first one was in October 2000. Suddenly he gets tangled up in a challenge. His foot plants awkwardly and boom, his tibia and fibula snap like a twig. And it's one of those injuries where the replay makes you feel sick because you literally see the leg buckle in a way that's not supposed to happen. He's on the ground screaming in agony, teammates waving frantically for the medics. And what's insane is that doctors later said if they hadn't treated it instantly, he could have lost his leg due to how bad the blood flow was cut off. Like it wasn't just career-threatening, it was limb-threatening. And yet somehow this guy makes it back in record time, defying the odds, gets fit again, starts playing, and you're thinking, damn, what a comeback story. But then 2 years later in 2006, right before the World Cup, he's playing a friendly for France against China. Just a tune-up game, nothing at stake, and lightning strikes twice. He goes in for a challenge, gets caught, and his right leg snaps again. Another brutal fracture, and you can see the shock on his face. He's holding his leg like he already knows the nightmare is happening all over again. And the French players are surrounding him, some turning away because they can't even look. And it's like this surreal moment, because how unlucky can one man be to have not one but two leg breaks of that magnitude in such a short span? and people were seriously worried his career was over. Like 2 catastrophic leg breaks before you're even 25 is usually a death sentence for a footballer. But Cissé had this insane willpower. He came back again, played for Liverpool, went on to Marseille, Sunderland, Lazio, even won trophies. And it's wild because he didn't just come back, he kept that explosive pace, that aggressive style, like he refused to let those injuries define him. And I think that's what makes his story so insane, because most guys after one break like that are never the same. They play with fear, they lose their edge, but Cissé went through it twice, stared it down, and somehow kept going, which is just one of the craziest displays of resilience you'll ever see in football. Man, the Neymar injury at the 2014 World Cup is one of those moments that felt like the entire country of Brazil just had its soul ripped out in real time. Because this wasn't just some random group stage match. This was the quarterfinals, Brazil versus Colombia, and Neymar was the face of the tournament, the guy carrying the weight of a nation on his back. He was only 22 but already playing like a superstar, scoring goals, creating magic, the whole country believing he could deliver that 6th World Cup. And then boom, in the 88th minute, Juan Camilo Zuniga comes in with this clumsy, reckless knee right into Neymar's lower back. And at first it doesn't even look catastrophic. You see Neymar go down, rolling, holding his bet, but then he's not getting up, he's not even moving, and suddenly you realize this is way more serious than a normal foul. The stretcher comes out, and when they're carrying him off, he's literally crying, his face twisted in pain, and the entire stadium goes silent, millions of Brazilians watching at home. And then the news drops later, he's fractured his vertebra, an actual broken bone in his spine, just millimeters away from a catastrophic spinal cord injury that could have left him paralyzed. Like, think about, we're talking about one of the brightest stars in world football, being an inch away from never walking again, let alone playing, and doctors basically said if Zuniga's knee had landed slightly differently, Neymar could have been in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. And that's terrifying. And for Brazil, it was like the dream collapsed right there. Because without Neymar, they had no focal point. The whole nation's hope disappeared. And you saw what happened in the very next game, that infamous 7-1 demolition by Germany. The players looked broken, emotionally wrecked, like they were playing with a ghost missing. And you can't help but connect it to that injury, because Neymar was more than just a player, he was the symbol of their World Cup. And the way it ended for him, lying in a hospital bed while his teammates got destroyed, it was heartbreaking. What's wild is that even after recovering, that scar never really left. You can see it in the way people talk about him. Some still say his career trajectory was altered by that moment, because when you're that close to paralysis, when you've had your spine literally broke, you can't ever fully be the same fearless kid. And yet Neymar still came back, still dazzled. But that injury remains one of the scariest reminders that even the most talented players can have everything ripped away in a single reckless moment. So when you look at all of these injuries, from Bust's leg snapping like a horror movie, to Eduardo's career getting derailed in a split second, Čech almost dying on the pitch, Cissé breaking his legs twice like some cruel joke from the universe, and Neymar's back being 1 inch away from ending his entire life as he knew it, just hits you with this crazy reminder of how fragile this whole thing really is. Because we watch football and we see the beauty, the goals, the drama, the glory, but underneath all of that, it's still human beings putting their bodies on the line every single time they step out there. And in one wrong second, it can go from the peak of athleticism to the lowest moment of your existence. And that's why I think these stories stick with us. Not just because they're shocking or graphic, but because they show us the other side of the game, the brutal reality, the raw humanity. And honestly, you've got to give respect to these guys who went through it. Some never recovered, some came back stronger, but all of them showed just how much sacrifice it takes to even be out there. So if you're listening right now, just remember to appreciate the game, appreciate the risk, and respect the warriors who make it what it is, because they're carrying scars we'll never fully understand. And with that, good luck to you guys chasing your own dreams. Stay safe, stay strong, and thank you for hanging out with me through this wild ride.